YouTube vinyl community, John Lennon fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens, and we are here today to talk about John Lennon's 1971 solo album, Imagine. We've got a French copy and a US copy, so pretty cool. Slightly different color variations. This one's more gray, this one's more blue. But yeah, this album is easily one of John's best albums, and for a number of reasons, beyond the fact that I think having a slightly more poppy aesthetic to it, I think keeps his focus together and creates a better album. I think he worked a little bit better under restriction than just kind of let loose. Sometimes. Not the case, but sometimes. This album came out during an era after the Beatles split up where things were just not fun. The Beatles breakup was easily one of the messiest things in rock music history at that time. And I'd say it's still up there as one of the worst things that ever happened to rock and roll music. But by this point, by the time this album came out at the end of 1971, that had been a pretty tumultuous year. So by the end of 1970, they had all started to go to court. Paul was suing the guys to get out of the contract. He wanted out. He wanted nothing to do with Alan Klein. He wanted to get away from the whole thing. And then through the early parts of 1971, as John once said, if anything, it brought Ringo, George, and John together more closely. But no one was on Team Paul. The whole thing was just not good at this point. And so it was recorded during an era where they were pretty bitter with each other, particularly John, George, and Ringo against Paul, and vice versa, Paul against the three other guys. So the whole thing was just a mess. There was one point in early spring where the four of them did have individual singles on the charts at the same time, which was pretty cool. I think they were all in the top 10 at the same time. So George's What Is Life, Power to the People by John, Another Day by Paul, and I Don't Come Easy by Ringo had just missed. I think they were almost all four at the same time. I think it was somewhere at the end of April, early May. So that's kind of cool. But I think resulting in that and everything John had gone through post-Beatles between his Primal Therapy, his Primal Scream Therapy, and the previous album, Plastic Ono Band, John Lennon, which is just a very, very personal, intense, deep album. That's a very hard listen, but an amazing album. And very stark, very sparse, very, very emotionally charged. Going to something like this album is a much more polished, produced band effort, whereas with the last album, it's mostly Klaus, Ringo, and John, and that's it. That's almost the entire album. So it's cool to hear him jump into another pop-esque world where it's a very fleshed out album. It's the first really fleshed out thing he's done, basically since Abbey Road. And I love it. It's easily one of his best albums. Some of his best songwriting is on here, and some of his most personal and acerbic and biting lyrics are on this thing as well. It was recorded, a lot of it was done at his home in Ascot in England. They also did some stuff at Abbey Road and at the record plant in New York City. Some of the songs on this album date back even to the late 60s. I think Oh Yoko was written in 1968, and a couple other things have been brewing up over the last few years at that point, but weren't really going to be used for any of their projects until John felt he had them fleshed out for this thing. And they work really well on this album. Came out in the States on September 9th, 1971, and about almost a month later, October 8th, in the UK. Went #1 all over the place. It was a big seller for him. And to this day, it's probably one of his most successful and most memorable solo albums he ever made, particularly because of the lead song on here. But, yeah, this album is absolutely fantastic. I really, really love this one. And, yeah, let's just start talking about these songs here, people. Imagine. I mean, what more can be said about this thing? It's been talked about a million times over the last 40-odd years now. More than that. Almost 50. Imagine is almost 50 years old. Whoa. Well, if you're watching this in 2021, it is now 50 years old. If you're watching this in 2018, it's almost 50. Hang on. It's almost there. Hang on. But, that said, it's an absolutely amazing song. I mean, the piano is so sad, but also introspective, and also a little contemplative. What's the word? It's thinking. It's a thinking song. It's easily John's most famous solo song. I mean, it's like What If, You know, imagine if this didn't exist. Imagine if that didn't exist. And he would go on to say years later that, like, excuse me, that this was an anti-religious song, or this was an anti-this or anti-that. He did feel that way, but I don't know. I think music's up for interpretation. I don't see it as such. I always saw it as like, just think about it. It doesn't have to be, but just think about it. Like, it could be like this, and imagine what that would be like if it was. But I mean, John's piano playing on this song is so delicate and thoughtful, and his voice is very smooth and very, very articulate, very focused. And it sounds like it's echoing from the clouds, which is interesting because of the first line. Imagine there's no heaven, so that's interesting. But it's a very moving song, and it has been for years. It's always been one of those songs that people, write on a T-shirt or have a poster in their room or something. Imagine all this. And the chorus is absolutely unbelievable. I mean, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Hope someday you can join us and the world would be as one. Like, what a brilliant piece of lyrical poetry. I mean, it's a fantastic set of words. I mean, holy moly, it's amazing. So, yeah, it is one of the best songs he's ever written, and the stark nakedness of the production and the playing on it just adds to the magic and the beauty of the whole thing. It's a fantastic track. From production, lyrical, composition, musicianship, the whole 9 yards, it's an amazing track. Which leads to Crippled Inside, with the next song on here, which is one of my favorites on the album. It's got this Americana ballroom, country, rockabilly kind of vibe. And I love that shuffle. I love that ballroom piano, vaudevillian kind of feel. And John just lays it out flat. Like, you can put on all the makeup you want, you can put on your best smile, you can put on some nice clothes, but you are broken to pieces on the inside. You can smile as hard as you want and make everyone feel like, hey, we're all cool, but on the inside, you are crippled inside. And the music, I think, lends itself to the whole, like, don't know whether to laugh or cry mentality. Having that juxtaposition of really happy, good-timey music that's just on the verge of a mental breakdown, I think lends itself well to the lyrics themselves and the way John sings it. He kind of lays it out to bear, kind of like, one thing you can't hide is when you're crippled inside. Amazing song. I love the slide guitars, the clapping drums, the really bouncy piano on this thing, the rollicking good time about depression. It's a fantastic song. And he's done themes about this kind of stuff before, going as far back to, like, I don't want to spoil the party, or I'm a loser, or even Help. But, like, never with this much of a mental breakdown vibe to it. I think having that, like I said, that juxtaposition of heavy, happy, bouncing music against super sad lyrics, the balance is there. Jealous Guy. This song started off as a track called Child of Nature during the White Album sessions, and then kind of got abandoned, and then grew new life as Jealous Guy. And again, probably one of John's most famous solo songs as well. But the piano, there's moments on the piano where it borders on a day in the life, where they hit dun 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 dun. I can't sing piano, but you know what I'm doing with that. Which is cool because it's got a little bit of a Beatles-esque vibe to it, as it should. It was written during the Beatles, so it's going to sound a little bit like a Beatles track, but it's also very much a John Lennon solo song. It's open, it's honest, it's beautiful. It's basically John laying it out saying, like, hey, I've done some crappy things in the past. I've been super jealous. I don't mean to. Didn't mean to hurt you, but I get jealous. And as Chromeo would say, I ain't cool with it. But there's a new music reference for it. I ain't with it, I think is what they say. Jealous, I ain't with it, I ain't cool with it. Something like, whatever. But it's one of those tracks where he doesn't sugarcoat his feelings. He's like just laying it out, saying like, I did this, it was wrong, I'm sorry, and here is my song, my musical apology. The whistling solo on here is fantastic. It's got a bit of that wayfaring stranger kind of feel, and I like that it's not perfect because the song itself is about him saying, I'm not perfect. So you get a bit of a, not off-key whistle, but there's moments where it cracks a little bit, and I like that human quality to it. Very cool. It's So Hard was another one of the first songs written or recorded for this album in February of '71. This and I Don't Want to Be a Soldier, a very early version of that, were recorded in February '71 at the same time as Power to the People was being done. And then they went back and re-recorded a lot of this stuff. But This is the first song on the album where it's got a bit of that cold turkey guitar vibe, that real crunchy, heavy, manic kind of feel, with that bluesy guitar kind of scream. It's definitely like a junior version of Your Blues, kind of. And I love the sax soloing on this song. I think it's fantastic. The string sections are very cool. And they add this sophisticated, twisted kind of mentality to the whole track itself. But, it's once again, it's another song but playing with the opposite. So you got, sort of bouncy, fun, rollicking music, and then lyrics about why life is so damn hard. So, cool arrangement again on that one. Really enjoyed that. And then I Don't Want to Be a Soldier, and side one. This is an amazing track. Production-wise, I think it was one of the coolest productions on this album. It's very expansive and atmospheric and huge. Sounds like it was recorded in a cave or a very, very large ballroom or something. But the way the drums, this is a very percussive led song. Lots of clapping, lots of drums, lots of kind of not ambient sounds, but like just kind of stuff going on in the background that leads to this whole, wading through the tall grass kind of feel. Because this was still the height of Vietnam, and people were still getting shipped off to Vietnam, so it was a very tumultuous time. And to write a song called "I Don't Want to Be a Soldier, I Don't Want to Die," like, it doesn't get more brutally honest than that. Especially fighting for a war, you get it. Humongous song. I mean, the whole song says it all. Really, this lays it out to bear. But the way he sings it, the way he puts his emotion into it, the way he's speaking for the people, really, as he loved doing at that point. And throughout most of his life, he sung for the people. But, yeah, amazing production on that track, for sure. Side 2 opens up with "Give Me Some Truth." Again, I'd say this is another one of his most famous songs, too. I mean, it's an amazing stab at culture, media, news, the political climate, the government, you name it, John's going after it. And there's so many moments in this song where he's got that out-of-breath delivery, just ripping these things apart. In that very lyrical way, he was able to do that. I love the really tricky guitar work that's on this thing throughout. That carries the entire song. The pounding drums, like I said, the out-of-breath vocal, I think is fantastic. And George Harrison's guitar work on this thing is absolutely brilliant. His slide guitar work is it's the perfect touch to this song itself. And I like having another Beatle on here. I think that just makes it feel a little more real, a little more special. Amazing song. "Oh My Love." This song is very cool, very tender, very directly from the heart, and it's delivered with such articulation. And Johnson's really focused on this track. He's really on fire. I think by this point in the album, you're like, he has written so many amazing songs on this album that are all completely fleshed out. The construction of the song itself is intelligently done. He's really showing his chops on this album. And he was doing so on the last album as well, but with Plastic Ono Band, that was meant primarily to be an exercise to get the demons out. And to be like, doesn't really matter if the songs have a chorus or a beginning or an end or whatever. Like, this is just how I feel right now. Here's my song. It's out of me. This one feels more, okay, I'm going to write like a song again. And "Oh My Love" is very raw. It's very soft. It's a very beautiful track. And his vocals on this song are absolutely amazing. Just nicely laid out, breezily across the music itself. It's got like a medieval sounding piano, and the guitar. I like the chimes that are on this thing, but awesome track. Very, very well done. Then you get to "How Do You Sleep," which, as anyone knows, is probably the most interesting song on this album besides "Imagine" or something. But this is John and Paul inventing the diss track. This is what rappers came to do years later, making music, calling each other out. Long story short, as like I said before, Paul and the other three Beatles weren't getting on too well. Ram had just come out, and the other three Beatles, particularly John and Yoko, felt that album was really against John and Yoko. In the song "Too Many People," there's lines like "too many people preaching practices," and they felt that was against them. The song "Three Legs," they thought was about the three Beatles. I'm trying to think of the other one. "Backseat of My Car," there's a line that goes, "We believe that we can't be wrong." There's a lot on that album that John and Yoko took as slights against them, when really, I think it was only the too many people preaching practices. I think the rest of it was just whatever. But, so, John took it as like, all right, I can do that. So Sergeant Pepper took you by surprise, and just goes on this tirade. I mean, this is a brutal song. And the original version of this thing with other lyrics, as they were writing it, was even worse. I mean, they were just going like to the wall with the amount of nastiness they can do. And there's moments where, especially in the Imagine film, but there's things I've read over the years, where John was writing this song and like kind of looking up at George as he was there, and George is going, yeah, okay, all right, that's funny. And apparently Ringo came in for one of these sessions and said, that's enough, John. Thinking like, all right, this has gone way too far, way too uncomfortable. Apparently Alan Klein threw in some lyrics, Yoko threw in some lyrics, so it was not a happy time, but they felt like this was what they had to do, because that's just what John was. He was a very emotional person. I mean, he would take something that Paul would have been very subtle about, and then John would have went steamrolling, train blown through the walls ahead, in a response, and that's what happened. And then after this, there wasn't much of that anymore. After that, it kind of died down. But it did really hurt Paul for years. I mean, there were interviews with him up until the 90s where he would say, yeah, that really did hurt me. But then he'd also say, oh, that was just John. That was just John being John. We'll never know. We were never involved. We were never in the Beatles. We will never, ever know what it was like to be those guys and what they went through. But How Do You Sleep, musically, is fascinating. With that chugging guitar riff, George's amazing slide guitar throughout. The strings do lend themselves very well in this production. They add a whole twisted mentality to it that really cut through the lyrics. There are versions without the strings on it that I think are even more fascinating, with just George's soloing throughout the entire track. But Klaus's really understated bass, Alan White's drums on this thing are just fantastic, and then you got Nicky Hopkins on piano. The whole blend, I mean, the whole album, these guys are on the album, but this track in particular is just fascinating. What a stab, what a groove, but, oh man, that's a deep, deep track. Holy crap. How is the next song on this album, and this for me is like a nice addition to the album, because it's probably, quote-unquote, the weakest song. That's not saying much, it's still a great track, but compared to everything else, it's a bit of a, not like a step back, but it doesn't have the same immediacy, the same punch. That said, it's extremely catchy. The whole "oh no" parts of these songs of the song are very memorable. I could almost see Marvin Gaye singing this song, like it was like slightly redone. I can totally get a Marvin Gaye vibe going on. But it's really sad, kind of a lullaby effect. I like John's voice a lot in this one. It's very tender, it's very, very soft. The strings are used in just the right spots. They're not hitting you over the head. They're very well done. But it's just John questioning life again. And that's something he was always good at writing about, was questioning the world around him. But yeah, good track. And then the album ends with "Oh Yoko," which I think is a great way to end the album. It's very happy, it's very sprightly, it's energetic. The musicianship on here is very tight, and it's just full of life. I mean, it's a song about the love of his life. So I mean, can't knock the guy singing about the girl he loves. Excellent harmonies on this track. It's very fun. It's very catchy. It sticks in your head. Can't say enough about that one. Great song. So with that, let me show you the inside of these things. I'll show you the inside of the French one. It's the same thing as the American one, but slightly different label. So you get the words, which is kind of cool, which he had done now for a couple albums here. And then this spiral thing, so you can read all the who's on what and who played on what. And the record itself, there's it's not going to show up too well. There's John, and then the Apple on side 2. Overall, this, for me, is one of my favorite John Lennon albums. I don't know if it's my absolute favorite, but it's definitely up there. He's got a few that I really, really enjoy. But that said, construction-wise, the band he had at this time with George You know, Alan White, Nicky Hopkins, Klaus Foreman on bass. I mean, he had a really tight group of guys playing with him at this point, and it shows. I think they all read and blend off each other very well. And the movie that was made for this thing, Give Me Some Truth video, it's all on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing there. That's always been a classic. Just seeing George and John hang out, eating food in the living room, in the kitchen there, just talking about Beatle stuff like Beatle Ed and Beatle Phil across the table. I mean, it's just fun to see them just click. Their humor just clicks, and then watching them in the studio together, watching George read John like a book, and John doesn't have to say a thing. George just knows what to do. That chemistry it's insanely tight, and that's always been the case for all four of them. Whenever any one of them got together musically, they know what to do, and it makes for a very, very effective track. But minus just the George and John stuff. This is a great album. The lyrics on here I think are fantastic. The musicianship delivers in a very dynamic, fun presentation that can be very emotional, very energetic, very subdued, very relaxed, and makes you think a lot of the time too. So for this album, I'm going with a 9 out of 10. I think it's an absolutely fantastic album. I don't know, I'm not feeling like a 10 out of 10. I don't know why, but I'm a 9 out of 10. I think it's still bloody fantastic. So that's it. My name's Giggens. This has been John Lennon, Imagine. Here's the back cover. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. My name is Giggens, John Lennon, Imagine. And that's it. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching. And the stop button is right there. Okay, bye.